It wasn't long ago that I reviewed the Cadisen Conquest Homage, and while that watch had some flaws, I was impressed with its value and its accuracy, both of which the watch owes to having a Miyota movement. So when GearBest recently contacted me and asked if they could send me a couple of watches to review, I asked if they could send a couple of Cadisens with Miyota movements, and this is the first of those two, which is model number 1025, which as far as I know is not an homage to any specific watch. And I was also trying to come up with a better nickname to give this a better title, but I couldn't quite come up with one. All I was coming up with was Ice Ball or Hand Fan. So if you have a better idea for a nickname, or if you actually know it's an homage watch, let me know in the comments below. But in the meantime, let's take a closer look. The case is listed as stainless steel, and has a classic rounded shape with rose gold plating. The top of the case has a polished look, with the side of the case having a more brushed texture. The overall finishing of the case is decent, with only some rougher angles on the lugs, as well as you can feel the sapphire on the case back protruding just a little. The edge of the case doesn't taper at all, it just goes straight up, so that when you're looking at it from the side, it kind of gives it the illusion that it's taller than it actually is, which it's not exceptionally tall, sitting at just under 11 millimeters, but I think it just looks like it. Now the width of the watch is just over 39 millimeters, which I think is a good size for a modern day dress watch, although some will still think it's too big, but at least it's not another 40 millimeter. With the crown, the watch is just over 43 millimeters, and it has a rather short lug-to-lug at 47. And as I said, it's not very tall, just under 11 millimeters, and it also weighs a rather light 65 grams. But the odd thing is that it uses 19 millimeter straps, which I personally don't have a lot of, and the 18 millimeter ones I have don't fit this watch style-wise or color. Now, only time will tell how well the rose gold finishing will wear, but at the moment it actually looks pretty good, and I think it goes really well with the dial, which is a silvery off-white coloring. The hour indicators are applied thin little bars in that same rose gold color, which I think gives it a very nice, elegant look. The minute indicators, as well as the Cadisen logo, are painted on in black, which I think the Cadisen logo in black just really doesn't look right to me. I think the watch would have been better off if they had just omitted it and left it a much more cleaner dial. The hands are rose gold and in a leaf style. They have a good proportionality to them, with the second hand going out to the chapter ring, and the minute hand being just a tad bit shorter. Now under the hands is what makes this dress watch a little different from the others. It's a rounded circle with a fan-like texture to it. I'm actually not sure if it's part of the dial or just applied to it, but the reflective silver texture looks really nice sitting just below the hands, especially that second hand as it moves around. The date window is at the 6, and it's a little small, but I appreciate the detail in framing it in a rose gold circle. I'm usually not a fan of rose gold, but overall, I like the look of this. It's not as subtle as some other dress watches, but it's also not screaming for attention. And the overall design, I think, is very symmetrically pleasing to the eye, which probably sounds really odd. But the rounded case and hour indicators draw your eye to the center silver circle, and the texture of that circle draws your eyes also to the center of the watch and the hands. Now, as you go to the back of the watch, you have some good news and bad. The good news is that you can see the movement, which is a Miyota 8200 series, but it's in a gold finish to match the rest of the watch, which is a really nice surprise, and I do appreciate the little extra effort on Cadisen's part here. Now with that Japanese movement, you get the usual, a standard beat rate, 40-hour power reserve, and quick set date, as well as hand winding, but no hacking. And just like the last Cadisen I looked at, accuracy is quite good, with this one gaining about 5.5 seconds a day. The bad news is the caseback itself, which is in a polished stainless steel instead of the rose gold, which is not a big deal by itself. But the bad part is that it's a snap-on caseback, which is not unheard of, but snap-on exhibition casebacks are probably one of the stupidest things ever made. So if you ever have to open her up to regulate it, just be very careful putting it back on. The last one I had was on a Tavis subby, and I accidentally cracked it by not taking my time putting it back on. Now the strap is this brown crocodile textured one, which is okay, and it's really what you'd expect from a watch of this price. It'll do for a little while, but you can easily get a better one. Although as a nice surprise, it does come with a deployment clasp. But unfortunately, it's probably the worst deployment clasp I've ever run into. When I first got it, one of the sides didn't want to open without a great deal of force. The metal tab was just too far bent over, which is an easy fix with some needle nose pliers, but it's not something that you should have to do on a new watch. But what's worse is the finishing on the metal of that clasp, which is absolutely horrible. All of the edges have sharp right angles, which wind up digging into the underside of your wrist as you wear it. So I think it pretty much ruins the strap that it comes with. So unless you're into sharp metal on your wrist, you'll probably want to replace it right away. But since it's a 19mm strap, you might have some trouble finding a replacement. But they are around, you just have to look for it. Now otherwise, the watch actually wears quite nicely. It's still bigger than a classic dress watch, but just a tad bit smaller than many of its 40mm contemporaries. Yet it still has a good wrist presence. With a different strap, you could easily forget it's there until someone asks you about it. There are a lot of Chinese dress watches around, but I think the $50 to $60 range is the sweet spot for value. You can find some good choices less than that, like the Star King. But at this price point, you start to see some more interesting dials, as well as you start to get Japanese movements from Seiko and Citizen. So this Cadisen fits right into that sweet spot. So if you are interested in getting this watch, I'd probably factor a new strap into the purchase price. But even then, at $55, it's a pretty good value, considering you are getting Sapphire and a Miyota movement. But let me know what you think about it in the comments, as well as if there are any other Cadisens I should take a look at. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for joining me.